In January 1968, NLF guerrillas, backed by North Vietnamese troops, launched a full-scale offensive against the cities and towns of the South. For 2 years, they had been cautious, avoiding big battles. But at Tet, the Vietnamese New Year, they staked everything on one all-out bid for victory. The Tet Offensive was one of the most stunning surprise attacks ever launched by an army. More than 80,000 guerrillas and North Vietnamese troops were thrown against the forces of the South Vietnamese government and their American allies. The battles were on a scale which no one had imagined the Vietcong could achieve. The fighting even spilled into the American embassy in Saigon. The Tet Offensive turned into a military catastrophe for the Vietcong. In clashes of shocking violence, the guerrillas lost most of their best fighters. But in one of the greatest ironies in the history of war, the Vietcong's military defeat turned into a political victory. It was a victory that would change the whole course of the war in Vietnam. American forces in South Vietnam had spent 1966 massively building up their numbers. Men and supplies poured in. Bases, airfields, and port facilities were expanded at a frantic pace. By the start of 1967, the Americans had 389,000 troops and were ready to go on the offensive. The American aim was to defeat the NVA and NLF force by now numbering nearly 128,000. For 7 years, the NLF had been fighting to overthrow the government of South Vietnam and reunite the South with the North. The North was backing them with supplies and men, and had sent units of the North Vietnamese Army to fight inside the South. American commanders wanted to take on the enemy's big units, the battalions and regiments. If U.S. forces could destroy them faster than they could be replaced, the war would soon be over. In fact, the American strategy had quickly run into trouble. After early battles in which enemy regiments had suffered heavy casualties, they had avoided head-on clashes. Instead, the Viet Cong meant to stick to hit-and-run and ambush. The Viet Cong's tactics caused American casualties to rise sharply. Instead of big battles, there were snipers, booby traps, and surprise attacks. The Americans grew increasingly frustrated as they mounted countless search and destroy operations, took casualties, and still failed to find important guerrilla units. The commander of American forces in Vietnam, General William C. Westmoreland, was determined to make the Vietcong fight big battles. Only then could superior American firepower be used to the full. One answer, Westmoreland believed, might be to attack in force into the Viet Cong's traditional base areas. These, he was sure the Viet Cong would fight to defend. By 1967, there were strong American Marine forces based in the heavily populated coastal areas of northern South Vietnam. In the Central Highlands, there were Army units, including the Air Cavalry Division. However, the greatest concentration of U.S. Army strength was in the Saigon area, and it was there, between the capital and the Cambodian border, that the Americans launched their biggest operations. The Viet Cong base areas targeted by the Americans were the Iron Triangle, only 20 miles from the capital Saigon, and War Zone C, near the Cambodian border. Along with War Zone D, these areas held strong NLF regional forces and the elite 9th Division. Supplied down the Ho Chi Minh Trail from North Vietnam, the bases were springboards for attacks in and around Saigon.